Is recording, recording. God, I wanna. Alright, so kiddos, right? You wanna know how to learn about yourself, right? Obviously, as a 21-year-old, right, I should know who I am at this point, right? Yeah. I was joking. I was like saying, like, I don't know. Yeah, when you're young, right, like, I don't know, being like in middle school, right, you're not like, oh man, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do for the rest of my life? I think, like, that's a big misconception about, like, how you should live your life, about, like, making one decision and, like, saying, like, oh, this is it, you know, this is the thing that I'm gonna do for the rest of my time. But, like, when you, like, go to college, you have actually, like, lots of people who kind of like switch careers because, like, they realize, oh, this is not for me. And you might think, like, oh man, I wasted so much time. But, like, if you think about it, is that, like, every failure, right, is not necessarily a failure. It's more so a sort of way of understanding what is the context of your life. You know what I mean? Like, I think I've heard this, like, analogy in the sense that saying that, like, on Google Maps, you don't know where you are, right? But you need to calibrate where you're going. So you have to probably, like, take like 5 steps forward or 5 steps back, and then the camera knows where you are, right? It's like kind of like stumbling in a dark room, right? You don't know where everything is, but you can touch the wall and you can feel for, like, where things are at. And then you have a greater sense of the space that you're inhabiting, you know what I mean? So yeah, personally, I'm gonna, like, state out that, like, I don't know myself, you know? But I think there are ways in which you can better understand yourself, so you get, like, a better sense of the room that you're, like, sitting in or standing in, you know? Actually, like, feeling the walls and, like, you don't need to see the room, you just have to know the room exists and that there are walls that are there, right? So this is as close as you can get to knowing yourself, you know? Obviously you won't know yourself until you die, and thus that is the book when the book closes, and, like, that is what your life is. That's what you know who you are, or at least that's what I think I am, you know? So I made a list, right? So I'm not good at PowerPoints, but we have my cool little whiteboard that we like. So this is my method of how to know yourself. So my first one is to journal. This has actually helped me a lot for, like, journaling, is that, like, when you journal, right, is that these are collections of, like, past entries of who you were, right? Who you were at the time, what you did, your behaviors, actions, interests, values, all of that, you know what I mean? And then by having everything compiled all together, this tells a story of who you are as a person, right? One time I became a model, you know, and that was, like, weird. It's like, oh, I did that, you know? Or I did animation, or I was in IT, right? Like, these things, like, they tell stories of, like, who I was, or, like, the people that I was with, you know, or the things I did with those people. And these tell stories about, like, our actions and behaviors. And then you can see, like, kind of, like, your interests, right? Like, the very, like, fine little things. Like, oh yeah, I really like watching YouTube. What kind of YouTube videos? And they're, like, about science or history or, like, philosophy or some other cool humanitarian kind of thing, right? So, like, you kind of see the patterns of who you are, right? The etymology, or known as, like, the history of the word itself, you know, or, like, its origins of the word, right? So in Greek, identity means sameness of being, right? And so what that means is that, like, your behaviors, like, probably over the course of, like, 90 days, right, that is who you are in this point in time, right? I was even talking to my friend the other day and saying that, like, there's this quote, it's, how we live our days is how we live our life, right? Like, my identity right now is being a college student, right? Me recording videos. This is me, being always tired, you know, buying stuff. That's my identity right now, you know? Your identity becomes, a lot less fluid if you've been doing it for a long time. So say, like, a bodybuilder is a bodybuilder because he has been working constantly, right? That's his identity. That's the stronger identity. The thing with, like, even identities is that there are some parts of you that are more permanent than others, right? So, like, obviously if you're black for, like, the entirety of your life, unless you're Michael Jackson. So yeah. Yeah, or, like, religion, you know, probably, like, you were religious when you're, like, younger all the way until, like, your adulthood, but then, like, oh, then you become atheist, you know? So I don't know, like identity is very like malleable. It's just that like there are different parts of you that kind of stay longer than they do for others, right? So yeah, so I say like journal out like who you've been, things that you've experienced, what you've been thinking. Even like which I have like a Discord. That's not even showing on the background, but like on Discord, I collect art. I collect ideas. I collect videos that I find that are inspiring, you know, and then I compile those. Not compile those, but I mean like I don't know. All of them are just like there in their own broad categories, and you can probably like see like sort of patterns in the way that you live. The thing that I feel like why journals are so important is because like I feel like I don't even know what happened like 2 weeks ago, you know, like what happened then, right? And that's scary to know that like, oh, I don't even know what happened, like I don't know, like past a certain time, you know, everything's just kind of like a string of events that happen but not necessarily concrete in where they land, you know what I mean? And like there's probably even like more moments in between that I'm not even aware of. So yeah, so I say like yeah, journal, definitely journal, so you can like remember who you were during a certain time, you know, so that'd be fun. Second point, right, I have is quizzes. For the most part, I think quizzes are really good. Don't do like BuzzFeed quizzes, like I don't know, I don't feel like they're like actually useful. It's like what is it, what character are you from like Turning Red, right? Like does that matter? I mean I guess so. Or like if you're Team Edward, or what's your favorite type of sandwich, like I don't know, those don't matter. But I think like if you do take those tests, I think that maybe that shows that you're kind of like a silly person, you know, or I don't know, your friend forced you to do it. But I like these quizzes, like what's called 16 personal or MBTI or Big Five. I think that's good in the sense that it shows you who, you know, what is your temperament, right? So say like I don't know, I mean obviously if you know about Big Five, is like asking yourself of like where are you in terms of your openness to experience, neuroticism, OC. Oh no, I forget S. So openness to experience, conscientiousness, neuroticism, extroversion, and agreeableness, you know, and then like obviously they're opposites, and see like where you sort of fit in, right? So like for me, I learned that I am more extroverted and high in openness to experience. Yeah, those are like my two like sort of I guess strong points, I guess. Yeah, yeah. I guess MBTI as well, like it's not as sort of scientific, we'll say, you know, it's more like a for like popular sort of thing for people to do and be like, oh man, I'm this like way. But I think to some degree that it has more, I guess, okay, we'll say like it has more depth, but like depth. But yeah, it kind of shows you like on the 16 personalities test that they show you kind of like, oh, what are your strengths, how your relationships are compatible with, or how you like test up with other sort of personalities and like see how you contrast. So well, it's not like I don't know, I wouldn't give the 100 like percent go, like say, oh yeah, this is what you should do, but I think it gives you a more standing about like, oh, who am I really, you know, like the general broad categories of like where you follow yourself within, you know. Yeah. And then I have this Howard Gardner, it's called quiz, right? He is responsible for the idea of multiple intelligences. I'm gonna like put a graphic here. If I don't, then it's fine. Yeah, so I think Howard Gardner's like quiz I think is like really useful actually. Like it kind of like he had this idea. So like think about like Einstein, right? Einstein was like this like mathematical genius, you know. He like made general relativity and all that other palooza and whatnot. Like that's cool, right? Like we see this man and we're like, yeah, genius, right? But like that kind of excludes out the other types of geniuses, right? That only for him it only accounts for the domain of like math and sciences, right? With there's other geniuses, like consider like the fact that like we have Kanye, we have like Beethoven. There's people who are like really good at music, right? And like there's other people who are like geniuses in art, right? So like Da Vinci or freaking Pablo Picasso or anyone in the Renaissance, really, right? Like there are people who are smart, right? It's crazy. And so you can't limit yourself to like say you're only like you're dumb in comparison to Einstein, you know? It's that there's a whole like variation of like where you sit, right? And I think it's really important. Like I like his approach in saying that like, oh, we have things that are inherent to us. These are the gifts that you're like genetically born with, right? So, you know, so like my brother, he's like really good at knowing where locations are at, right? Like he hasn't even like driven anywhere, but like I can tell like his visual spatial awareness is like very good. Even shows up in the way that he plays games, right? Like he plays Fortnite like all day, but like I'm sure that he's like really good at like mapping out where like everything is. Like, yeah. So, just give you like rundown. It's sort of like you got linguisticals, really good at like languages and stuff like that, or you're a poet or a writer. You got visual spatial. These are like artists, people who are really good at like driving, probably knowing where your location is, or exploring or traveling. So that's pretty good. Musical geniuses, as I said. You have intrapersonal, so these are people who are like me, who are very like good at like ideas and knowing about oneself, you know. Then you got naturalists. So naturalists are people who like think about like Australian people, like I don't know, like oh I'm going to touch this alligator, you know what I mean? Or people who are like really good at like cooking, right? Because like that deals with the senses, right? It's like oh identifying like alligators or like touching leaves or knowing the plants and stuff like that. That's like just knowing about your nature, right? God, I'm sure there's more. There's mathematical genius and scientific and logical. So those are like lawyers, Albert Einstein, these are scientists. Interpersonal, so these are people who are like very like good socially. You know, like you have your like charismatic people who love talking, you know, and like I don't know, can make the room like happy, you know, like oh, they're just like amazing people, right? Struggling. I'll go look it up. It's amazing. It's like, oh man, you're not even prepared. Yeah, it looks like this. Okay, it's whatever. Yeah, I'll just put it up. So we already said logical, mathematical, musical, naturalist, spatial, interpersonal, linguistical. Oh yeah, and then body kinesthetics. So these are people who are like acrobats, fighters, runners, you know, like anyone who's like really good with their body. In a sense, you could probably even say like people who are like playing like violin, right? Because like they know how to like have their eye-hand coordination. Like they're really good with that, you know? Interpersonal. And then the last one is like existential. I personally don't understand what it means necessarily, but it's saying it's like tackling the questions of why we live and why we die. So this is, I guess, is more so philosophical, maybe? I don't know. Answering big questions. I don't know. I don't know how that like really relates necessarily to anything. But yeah. But I don't know. These are like very broad categories of like where your sort of talent exists, right? So, yeah. And then the last one, right, which I recommend always, everyone, if you're lost in general, right, is like to explore. You know, I feel like this, I mean, like exploring really ties in with the last point of journaling because like in the case of like not knowing yourself, right, it's that you still don't know yourself, right? Like even if you did journal, right, you know what your past is, right? And you take in all the quizzes, right? Is that like you don't stop there necessarily? Is that like again like you never stop changing, right? Unless you decide like okay, I'll just live the same life I always do. Wake up at like I don't know 8, go to class, what you call do whatever, live mindlessly. But like I don't know, like explore. You know what I mean? Like you won't know who you are unless you come into contact with new things to decide who you are. You know, like different situations bring out different people, you know? Like if I decide like I don't know, like as I said is that like I became a model. I never know that that I became a model that I would be doing it, you know? And like through actually like modeling I discovered like, oh wow, I'm really good at it and like I don't know. Yeah, like just like posing and stuff like that, and like people found like my expressions like really good for like taking photos, and it's like, oh wow, it's crazy. or like going to animation that like I'd be good at fighting scenes, and like, oh wow, that's crazy. I thought I'd only become like an artist, you know, but like I have some degree of competency within being an animator, so I think that's really cool. And so like yeah, just like what I mean by explore is like, I don't know, consume like foreign films, or go outside and travel the world, or like, I don't know, just like take on weird jobs, you know, so you can like see like, oh wow, this is the kind of things that I like to do, you know, to like explore, or I don't know, that I don't like this job, it's terrible, god awful, terrible, right? So yeah, yeah, in conclusion is that like this is just like the very basis of like what I believe in terms of like how you find yourself, right? It's just like you journal so you can know your past, right? And you can know your present. And then you take quizzes so then you can probably like get a good estimate of like who you are now, as well as predict your future, you know? And then exploring is more so like the intaking of new information. So that like comes back into your journal, you know? So you make discoveries and you make reflections, and so then you can like refine your sense of self in the current moment within like the 30 days time span. You know, like not necessarily like 30 days time span, but I mean like obviously your identity kind of changes from day to day, you know? You can even say like week to week and stuff like that, but like, yeah. Well, anyways, camera's saying like it's gonna time to go, so guess it's time to go. Whoa. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Bye.